Time is 11 minutes past 8. Our top story this morning: in a Sussex zoo criticised for using rat poison just a stone's throw from exotic birds.
It is a lack of care, because if you're going to be putting animal poison in an animal's enclosure, you're going to have to be responsible for what animals get poisoned by that, and that's including ones that are in their care.
11 rainbow lorikeets have been poisoned. Drusillas Zoo is defending its decision.
It's just really unfortunate that this happened, and nobody has been more affected than the zookeeping staff who dedicate their lives to these animals.
Right, if you haven't yet heard the detail of this story, basically the bait was laid because rats attacked and killed 5 rainbow lorikeets at the animal park. But although it was laid deep underground, the rodents brought it up the surface. And earlier, Joel Black from Eastbourne Animal Rights Action told me that the zoo should have done more.
Putting any sort of chemical control in an enclosure with other animals carries a lot of risks. And it wouldn't be the first time that other animals have died because of rat bait.
And it's a view backed up by fellow campaigner Michelle Hatch.
We wanted to raise awareness because if it wasn't for us in the first place contacting the newspapers, Drusillas would have kept this quiet. And we don't think this is the first incident that animals have died there. And because they're a private company, they're not actually liable to anyone. But we think to the paying public and also just concerned members of the public, they should be liable to somebody.
Well, Wimbledon Council tell us they're investigating. Drusillas say they're reviewing their procedures. In a moment, we'll find out from Pest Controller the best method to control vermin around other animals. But joining me on the line now is Mark Kenwood, headkeeper at Drusillas Park. Good morning to you, Mark.
Good morning. Thanks for having us on the show.
No, well, thank you for coming on to the programme, which is the main thing. We're pleased to speak to you in person. Obviously, a really unfortunate incident, this.
It's been absolutely horrific. I've said repeatedly, we're hugely saddened by what has happened, and we pull out all the stops every day to make sure that we assess all of our policies and get them spot on.
Okay, what do you learn from this experience?
Well, what I would just like to say is, with the baiting that we do within the park, baiting is always a last resort, and I would like to just inform everybody that we take every step possible to protect our animals. That's the business that we're in. Baiting is always a last resort. We exhaust every option in terms of controlling local wildlife or pest species. So putting bait down was the last resort. We don't have the luxury of putting down tamper-proof rat boxes. If you look at the size of one of our birds and look at the size of a rat, our birds are technically smaller, and therefore they can get into these boxes.
This sounds, therefore, that actually you would do the same thing again, then?
We wouldn't necessarily do the same thing again, no. What we do with our enclosures, when we build our enclosures, we underpin them. And basically what that means is there is a layer of weld mesh underneath the enclosure, fine weld mesh, which prevents the rats from coming up through the bottom of the enclosure. Rats can chew through sheet steel. If they can get a purchase on that, they will chew through sheet steel, and if they can find a weakness, then they will get through that and they come up into the enclosure. So we will look at every measure possible to make sure that nothing like this happens again.
Can I pick up on the points that were raised by the Eastbourne Animal Rights Action Group? They came on in the last other programme. One of the things they accused you of being is effectively somewhat secret about how you go about things. You're a private company, so you don't have to be transparent on your procedures and on what you actually do or choose not to do.
Okay, that's completely and utterly wrong. We undergo over 20 inspections every single year, exactly the same inspections as any other zoo in the country and throughout Europe, and we conform to every protocol and policy that is put in front of us. As soon as this became a problem, we acted on it immediately, to the point where I'm actually currently on annual leave at the moment and have ended my annual leave to come in and work on this. So no, as soon as this became a problem, we acted in every way that we would need to.
So what will you be doing now to ensure nothing like this happens again?
Well, we'll be talking to all of the local council, and we will look at our baiting policies. And also, I would also just remind everybody that Drusillas has been around for 90 years. We've been working with the local wildlife for all of that period. So the best part of 100 years in terms of controlling pest species entering the park. Although this is just terribly sad that this has happened, this is the first time that it has happened. It won't happen again, and all of the animals at the park are in tip-top health all year long.
And just to be clear, so obviously we've heard about these 11 rainbow lorikeets. There was some speculation that maybe a panda had been affected by this. Were any other of the animals in the park affected by this rat poison?
Absolutely not. And from your previous interview, I mean, I know they pointed out that they're not experts on this situation. Without the risk of blowing my own trumpet, I am an expert on this situation, and our pandas, which we have had for many years, are still in the enclosure. They are very, very healthy, as are the rest of the animals in the park.
All right, Mark, thank you for your time this morning. Thanks for coming on to the programme. Listening to that, Paul Bates, Managing Director of Cleankill Pest Control from Seaford. Morning to you.
Morning, Mark.
What lessons are to be learnt for Drusillas, if anything, here?
Well, I think pest control in any zoo is very, very different from any other aspect of pest control. It must be working together. Integrated pest management is what we call it, because we can't just go in and carry out pest control. We must work together with the keepers to know what the risk to each individual animal is. Different animals have different risks to different poisons. The problem here sounds that it's not that there were rats in the enclosure, but that the enclosure didn't exclude the rats. And the first thing has to be looking at exclusion. And the last gentleman said that they use welded mesh beneath the enclosures. There's always dangers of secondary poisoning, which appears to be what's happened. One of the things that's happened here is the rats brought up some grain, which of course birds will be attracted to the grain if that's what was being used.
We heard there from Mark talking about actually it's the last resort to use poison, but what about sort of poison-free rat traps, that kind of thing?
Rat traps are being used around the country more and more again now. It's almost going back to old-fashioned pest control. There's very modern types of rat traps that can be used successfully. We would be very, very wary of even putting traps into enclosures if other animals could get into the enclosure. If the rats were as bad as it appears that they may have been in the lorikeet enclosure, I think the first thing we would have suggested is that the birds get moved out and you start digging out the rat burrows. You've got to find out where they're getting in, how they're getting in. Even things like backfilling the burrows with pea shingle that the rats would find very difficult to burrow through.
All right, we'll leave it there only because of time, Paul, and thank you for your insight there, MD of Cleankill Pest Control from Seaford. I guess, I mean, you know, if you've ever had the problem of rats at home or your business, you know just how difficult it can be. It sounds quite a complex problem, actually. 18 minutes past 8.